What if a single unexpected encounter could change everything? For William Carter, a millionaire living in the cold silence of his opulent mansion, life seemed hollow despite his wealth. But one quiet Sunday morning, during a routine jog, a young girl's innocent words stopped him in his tracks. "I know you. Your picture is in my dad's wallet." Little did he know those words would lead him to a door he hadn't dared to open in years, a door to his past, his estranged brother, and a journey toward redemption. Curious to see how one moment can transform a life? Stay tuned for a heartwarming story of family, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love. The early rays of sunlight streamed through the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows of William Carter's mansion, illuminating the carefully curated luxury of his surroundings. The marble floors gleamed, and the ornate furniture stood in perfect symmetry. Despite the grandeur, William felt an all-too-familiar emptiness creeping in, a silence that echoed louder than any sound. At 45, William was the picture of success. As the CEO of a leading tech firm, his decisions shaped industries and moved markets. His face graced the covers of magazines, his name synonymous with innovation. Yet, in the solitude of his Silver Pines estate, life felt hollow. Sunday mornings were William's reprieve, a chance to escape the suffocating walls of his opulent home. Pulling on a sleek set of running gear and lacing up his high-tech shoes, he prepared for his weekly ritual, a long jog through the manicured streets of the exclusive neighborhood. It was his attempt to outrun the thoughts that often crowded his mind. The streets were quiet, as they always were this early, the stillness broken only by the sound of sprinklers or the soft hum of a gardener's tools. William's strides were rhythmic, each step hitting the pavement in perfect synchronization, but his thoughts were anything but orderly. He found himself wondering, again, what all his success had truly amounted to. His mansion, his cars, and his wealth felt more like gilded cages than accomplishments. He couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something essential was missing. Lost in his reverie, he almost didn't hear the voice. "I know you. Your picture is in my dad's wallet." The unexpected words stopped him in his tracks. Turning toward the sound, he saw a little girl standing on the sidewalk, her brown hair tied neatly in pigtails. Her eyes, large and filled with curiosity, were locked on him, and William blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice breaking the morning quiet. The girl stepped closer, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers in her hand. "You're the man in the picture my dad keeps in his wallet," she said confidently, her gaze unwavering. For a moment, William didn't know what to say. The idea of being in someone's wallet, particularly in this modest neighborhood at the edge of Silver Pines, was baffling. His curiosity was piqued. "Your dad?" William asked, crouching slightly to meet her eye level. "What's his name?" "Henry," she replied with a smile. "Henry Carter. He's my dad." William froze. The name hit him like a thunderbolt, sending a rush of memories flooding back. Henry Carter, his younger brother. A name he hadn't spoken, let alone thought about, in years. He stood there, his mind racing, piecing together fragments of their shared past and the years of estrangement that followed. "Are you okay, mister?" the girl asked, tilting her head. William forced a smile, though his heart was pounding. "I'm fine, just surprised. Your name is Sophie, right?" The girl's eyes widened in delight. "How did you know?" "It's a lucky guess," he said softly, though inside he was anything but calm. What were the odds of this chance encounter? And what had happened to his brother, Henry? Why was his photo in Henry's wallet after all these years? Before William could ask more questions, Sophie grabbed his hand. "Come on, you should meet my dad. He'll be so happy to see you." William hesitated. He wasn't sure he was ready for whatever awaited him. He hadn't seen or spoken to Henry in over a decade. Their last conversation had ended in anger, with words that neither could take back. Could he face the man his brother had become and confront the man he himself had been? But Sophie's bright eyes and eager tugging left little room for debate. "It's just over there," she said, pointing toward a row of modest homes that lined the street ahead. Taking a deep breath, William let her lead the way, each step filling him with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. As they walked, The towering mansions of silver pines gave way to smaller, humbler homes. The contrast was stark, a shift from perfection to imperfection, from opulence to reality. "This is it," Sophie declared, stopping in front of a quaint, weathered house with peeling paint but a well-tended garden. She knocked on the door, her little fist rapping with an assurance that William couldn't help but admire. The door opened slowly, and there he was, Henry Carter, older, wearier, and somehow both a stranger and someone achingly familiar. His once youthful face was lined with years of struggle, and his frame, though still sturdy, seemed burdened by unseen weights. The world around William seemed to blur as he stood in the doorway staring at his younger brother. Henry's face told a story of its own, tired eyes framed by crow's feet, a dusting of gray in his unkempt beard, and an expression that wavered between disbelief and cautious hope. It had been over a decade since they'd last seen each other, but in this moment it felt as though no time had passed at all. And yet, everything had changed. "William," Henry said again, his voice soft, almost testing the sound of the name as if it might disappear. "Henry," William replied, his tone equally tentative, as though he were afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile moment. Sophie, oblivious to the tension thickening the air, tugged on her father's hand with excitement. "See, Daddy, I told you I found him." Her bright smile lit up the doorway, breaking through the awkward silence. Henry knelt beside his daughter, his large hands resting gently on her shoulders. "Sophie," he said gently, "why don't you go inside and grab your coloring book? Daddy needs to talk to Uncle William for a minute, okay?" "Okay," Sophie chirped, her pigtails bouncing as she skipped into the house. Henry straightened and looked back at William. I didn't expect to see you here," he said, crossing his arms defensively. "How did you—" "Your daughter," William interrupted, his voice calm but filled with unspoken questions. "She recognized me. She said my picture is in your wallet." Henry blinked, momentarily stunned. "Yeah," he admitted after a pause. "It is." "Why?" William asked, his voice cracking slightly. "After all this time, why would you keep my photo?" Henry glanced back into the house as if to ensure Sophie was out of earshot. "It's complicated," he said finally, stepping aside. "Come in." The house felt like stepping into another world. Unlike the cold grandeur of William Carter's mansion, this space radiated warmth and resilience. It was small, with signs of wear and tear. The couch had frayed edges and the wallpaper showed a few stains. But it felt lived in. It felt loved. William's eyes wandered to the walls, taking in an array of family photos. There were snapshots of Sophie at different stages of her life, playing soccer in a patchy field, grinning with missing teeth in a school picture, blowing out candles on a cake. But one photo stood out, a framed portrait of a woman holding a newborn Sophie. The woman's face shone with joy, her dark eyes alight with life, as if she were the anchor of this little family. Her absence in the more recent photos was glaring. William felt a pang of guilt stab through him. He hadn't known this woman. He didn't even know her name. Henry's voice broke the silence. "Sit if you want. Coffee?" William turned to see his younger brother standing awkwardly in the doorway to the kitchen, his tone polite but distant. "Sure," William replied, his voice strained. "Thanks." Henry nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. Left alone, William took the opportunity to absorb more of the surroundings. Sophie's crayon drawings were proudly displayed on the fridge, their bright colors a stark contrast to the muted tones of the room. A small bookshelf by the corner overflowed with children's books and a few novels with cracked spines. There were no signs of luxury here, but there was something else, something William's own home lacked: love. When Henry returned, he carried 2 mismatched mugs. He handed one to William, then sat across from him, cradling his own cup. His expression was unreadable, but his posture was tense, his shoulders hunched defensively. "So," Henry began, breaking the silence, "what's the occasion? You never reached out before." William winced, the words cutting deeper than he'd expected. "I know, and I'm sorry. I don't have an excuse, Henry. I've thought about you, but I didn't know how to reach out." Henry let out a bitter laugh. Didn't know how, or didn't want to. William's throat tightened. He forced himself to meet his brother's gaze. "Both," he admitted. "I was ashamed. I didn't know how to face you after everything." Henry's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening as he gripped his mug. "You left," he said quietly, his voice shaking with restrained emotion. "When I needed you most, you disappeared. Do you even know what that felt like? To have no one?" The accusation landed like a punch. William's chest tightened. "I can't imagine," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm here now. I want to make things right." Henry leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Make things right? You think you can just waltz in here and fix everything with your money? That's not how life works, William." William flinched at the venom in Henry's voice, but forced himself to hold steady. "It's not about money," he said firmly. "It's about us, about family." Henry's laugh was sharp and hollow. "Family? You think we're still family? Where were you when Maria died, when Sophie was born, when I was drowning in debt because of my own stupidity? You weren't there." The mention of Maria hit William like a physical blow. "Maria," he murmured, his hands trembling. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," Henry snapped. "You were too busy living your perfect life in your perfect mansion, weren't you?" The bitterness in Henry's tone was palpable, and William felt as though the walls were closing in. He had no defense. Henry was right. He'd been absent, too consumed by his own ambitions to notice his brother's struggles. "You're right," William said softly. "I wasn't there. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life." For a moment, neither brother spoke. The weight of their shared history of the years of silence and pain hung heavy in the room. Then, as if sensing the tension, Sophie's cheerful voice rang out from the other room. "Daddy! Uncle William, look what I made!" The little girl burst into the living room, clutching a piece of paper in her hands. She held it out proudly for them to see. It was a crayon drawing of 3 figures, one tall, one medium, and one small, all holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "It's us," Sophie declared, beaming. Henry's shoulders slumped and some of the anger drained from his face. He reached out and took the drawing, his fingers brushing against Sophie's. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, his voice soft. William leaned closer to admire the drawing. "It really is," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He looked at Sophie, her bright eyes full of innocent joy, and then at Henry, whose expression had softened into something resembling acceptance. Sophie tilted her head, looking up at William. "Uncle William," she said, "are you going to visit us again?" William glanced at Henry, his heart pounding. He didn't want to overstep, didn't want to push too far too fast, but Sophie's hopeful gaze was impossible to resist. Henry hesitated, his gaze flickering between William and Sophie. Finally, he let out a slow breath and gave a reluctant nod. "We'll see," he said, his tone cautious but not unkind. "I'd like that," William said, his eyes meeting Henry's. "I'd really like that." For the first time in years, a fragile thread of hope wove its way between the two brothers. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for William, it was more than he'd dared to hope for. The next morning, the crisp autumn air carried a promise of new beginnings. William stood outside the small cafe he had suggested for breakfast, shifting nervously as he waited. The cafe, with its cheerful yellow awning and the scent of fresh pancakes wafting through the air, was a world apart from the high-end restaurants he usually frequented. But it felt right, humble, welcoming, and perfect for the occasion. When Henry and Sophie appeared at the corner, William's nerves eased slightly. Sophie skipped ahead, her pigtails bouncing as she waved enthusiastically. "Uncle William, we're here!" William smiled warmly. "Good morning, Sophie. Good morning, Henry." Henry gave a brief nod, his hands tucked into the pockets of his worn jacket. "Morning, William." Sophie grabbed William's hand, pulling him toward the entrance. "Come on, I'm starving." The three of them found a cozy booth near the window. Sophie slid in first, followed by Henry, who hesitated for a moment before settling across from William. The table's simplicity, a small vase of flowers and a stack of laminated menus, helped ease the tension. "Order whatever you'd like," William said, handing a menu to Sophie. She studied it with wide eyes, her finger tracing the words as she read. "I want pancakes," she declared, pointing to the picture on the menu. "And bacon and orange juice." "Good choice," William said, chuckling. "What about you, Henry?" "I'll take the same," Henry said, setting the menu aside. He looked at William briefly. "Thanks for breakfast." William waved it off. "It's my pleasure." The waitress arrived, her warm smile setting a friendly tone. She jotted down their orders and disappeared into the bustling kitchen, leaving the family alone in the growing buzz of morning diners. "So, Sophie," William began, leaning forward slightly, "what's your favorite thing to do?" Sophie beamed. "I love drawing and playing soccer. Daddy's teaching me. He says I'm getting really good." William raised an eyebrow, glancing at Henry. "Soccer, huh? I didn't know you still played." Henry shrugged. "Not as much as I used to, but Sophie enjoys it, so we kick the ball around on weekends." "Uncle William," Sophie interjected, her tone curious. "Did you play soccer with Daddy when you were kids?" William smiled, memories of their childhood bubbling to the surface. "We did. Your dad was always better than me, though. He had this trick shot I could never figure out." Henry chuckled softly. "Still can't, probably." Their laughter felt natural, a small crack in the wall that had built up between them over the years. Sophie giggled, delighted to hear her dad and uncle sharing stories. The food arrived, and Sophie's eyes lit up as the waitress set down her plate. "Wow, look at all this." "Dig in," William said, taking a bite of his own pancakes. As they ate, the conversation began to flow more easily. Sophie filled the gaps with stories about school, her friends, and her plans to become a famous artist one day. William listened attentively, marveling at her energy and vivid imagination. When the plates were nearly empty, William decided to broach the topic that had been on his mind since the day before. "Henry," he began cautiously, "I owe you an apology." Henry set his fork down, his gaze steady but guarded. "For what?" "For not being there," William said, his voice low but sincere. "When you needed me the most. When Maria passed. When Sophie was born. I should have been there." Henry looked at him for a long moment before responding. "You're right, you should have. But I wasn't perfect either, William. I pushed people away during my struggles with gambling and losing Maria. I guess I figured you wouldn't want anything to do with me." William shook his head. "That's not true. I was so wrapped up in my own life, building the company, chasing success, that I didn't realize how much I was missing. I'm sorry, Henry. Truly." Henry leaned back, exhaling deeply. "We both made mistakes," he said finally. "But maybe it's not too late to fix things." Sophie, who had been listening quietly, suddenly chimed in. "Does that mean we'll see Uncle William more often?" Henry smiled faintly at his daughter. "Maybe, sweetheart, if Uncle William wants to, that is." "I do," William said immediately. "I'd like to be part of your lives. Both of you, if you'll let me." The sincerity in his voice seemed to reach Henry, who nodded slowly. "All right. Let's take it one step at a time." Sophie clapped her hands, her excitement infectious. "Can we go to your house, Uncle William? Do you have a pool? I've always wanted to swim in a pool." William laughed. "Yes, I do, and I'd love to have you both over. How about next weekend?" Henry glanced at Sophie, who was practically bouncing in her seat, and then back at William. "Sure," he said, his voice tinged with cautious optimism. "We'll be there." As they left the cafe, the morning sun shining brightly above them, William felt a sense of hope he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just about reconnecting with Henry or making up for lost time. It was about building something new together. The future, once filled with emptiness, now felt full of possibilities. The weekend arrived with a clear blue sky and warm sunshine, the perfect day for new memories. William stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in his mansion, gazing out at the expansive garden where the pool glistened under the sunlight. For the first time in years, he felt a nervous energy coursing through him, not because of a business deal or a board meeting, but because his brother and niece would soon be arriving. The sound of the intercom startled him. "Sir, your guests have arrived," the housekeeper's voice announced. William smiled, straightened his shirt, and headed to the grand entrance. When he opened the door, Sophie was the first to greet him, her eyes wide with awe as she took in the sprawling mansion. "Uncle William, your house is huge," she exclaimed, her small hands gesturing dramatically. William chuckled. "It is, isn't it? But it's a lot more fun when it has people in it. Welcome, Sophie." He turned to Henry, who stood a few steps behind, his expression guarded but polite. "Henry, I'm glad you came." Henry nodded, extending his hand. "Thanks for inviting us." William shook his hand firmly, grateful for the unspoken trust they were beginning to rebuild. "Come on in. Let me show you around." Sophie dashed inside, her excitement contagious. She marveled at the grand staircase, the high ceilings, and the gleaming floors. "This is like a castle," she said, twirling in the middle of the foyer. Henry followed more slowly, taking in the opulence with a mix of curiosity and unease. "This is impressive," he said, his tone neutral. "It's a lot of space for one person," William admitted. "Too much space, honestly. It's been quiet. Too quiet. For far too long." As they walked through the house, William couldn't help but notice Sophie's pure delight. She gasped at the state-of-the-art home theater, squealed at the game room, and practically ran toward the glass doors leading to the pool. "Can I swim now, Uncle William?" she asked, pressing her face against the glass. William laughed. "Why don't we finish the tour first? I promise you'll have plenty of time to enjoy the pool." He guided them to the kitchen where a spread of snacks and drinks awaited. "Help yourselves," he said. "I thought we could have lunch by the pool later." By mid-morning, Sophie was splashing happily in the pool, her laughter echoing through the garden. William had set up a shaded area with comfortable loungers where he and Henry sat watching her play. "She's a natural," William said, gesturing toward Sophie as she swam to retrieve a floating ball. "She loves the water," Henry replied, his voice soft. "Maria used to take her to the community pool every weekend. It's one of the few things Sophie still remembers about her mom." William hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Henry, I want you to know, I regret not being there when Maria passed. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for you and Sophie." Henry's gaze remained on his daughter. "It was," he admitted, "but I had to keep going. For her. She gave me a reason to pull myself together." "You've done an incredible job," William said sincerely. "Sophie's a bright, happy kid. That's because of you." Henry looked at him, surprised by the compliment. "Thanks," he said after a pause. "That means a lot." Later, William joined Sophie in the pool, her squeals of delight making him laugh. "Catch!" she shouted, tossing the ball toward him. He caught it clumsily, pretending to struggle as Sophie giggled uncontrollably. "Come on, Dad," Sophie called. "Join us." Henry shook his head. "I didn't bring a swimsuit." William stood in the shallow end, hands on his hips. "I have extras," he said with a grin. "No excuses." Reluctantly, Henry changed into one of William's spare swimsuits and waded into the pool. Soon, the three of them were engaged in a lively game of water volleyball, their laughter ringing through the air. As the afternoon wore on, the family dried off and settled on the patio for lunch. The scent of grilled burgers and hot dogs filled the air as William manned the barbecue, while Henry helped Sophie set the table. "This is so good," Sophie said between bites, her face lighting up with a smile. "I'm glad you like it," William replied, his chest warming at her enthusiasm. After lunch, Sophie wandered off to explore the garden, leaving William and Henry alone on the patio. The mood shifted slightly, growing more serious. "Henry," William began, choosing his words carefully, "having you and Sophie here today, It's made me realize just how much I've been missing. I want to be part of your lives, not just for a day or two, but for the long haul." Henry leaned back in his chair, studying his brother. "It's not that simple, William. A lot has happened. Trust takes time to rebuild." "I know," William said earnestly. "And I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I don't expect things to change overnight. But I want to try." Henry considered this for a moment before nodding slowly. "All right. Let's take it one step at a time." William exhaled, relief flooding through him. "Thank you, that's all I can ask for." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Sophie sat by the pool with her feet dangling in the water. William joined her, handing her a towel. "Did you have fun today, Sophie?" he asked. "The best day ever," she replied, wrapping the towel around her shoulders. "Thank you, Uncle William." "You're always welcome here," he said, ruffling her hair. Henry appeared behind them, his expression softer than William had ever seen it. "We should get going. It's getting late." William nodded. "Let me drive you home. It's the least I can do." As they piled into William's sleek car, Sophie chattered happily about her plans to return. "Next time, can we watch a movie in your theater, Uncle William?" "Absolutely," William said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Any movie you want." When they reached Henry's modest home, William hesitated before saying goodbye. "Thank you for coming today," he said, looking at both Henry and Sophie. "It meant a lot to me." "It meant a lot to us, too," Henry admitted. "We'll see you soon." Sophie waved enthusiastically as they walked toward the house. William stayed parked for a moment, watching them disappear inside. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of hope, a belief that this could be the start of something truly meaningful. William Carter arrived at the modest community center early Saturday morning, the sound of children playing echoing faintly from a nearby park. The center was an old building, its once vibrant blue paint now chipped and faded. A broken swing in the adjacent playground creaked in the breeze, and the sight of boarded-up windows painted a stark picture of neglect. Henry was waiting for him outside, dressed in his usual casual attire. Beside him stood Elena, the community center's director, a woman in her early 40s with a warm but weary smile. Her clipboard and purposeful stance hinted at her dedication to this place despite its challenges. "William, this is Elena," Henry said as William stepped out of his sleek car. "She's been running the center for years." "Nice to meet you," Elena said, extending her hand. "Henry tells me you're interested in helping." "More than interested," William replied, shaking her hand. "I want to see how I can contribute." Elena led the brothers inside, where the building's condition was even more evident. The main hall, once a space for community gatherings, had peeling paint and a warped floor. A row of tables lined one side, littered with broken art supplies and tattered books. The faint smell of mildew lingered in the air. "We used to run so many programs here," Elena said, her voice tinged with sadness. "Art classes, after-school tutoring, even a seniors book club. But funding dried up, and the building fell into disrepair. We're barely holding on." Henry shot a glance at William, who nodded thoughtfully. "What's your biggest challenge right now?" William asked. Elena sighed. "Everything. The roof leaks, the electrical system is outdated, and we're short on supplies and volunteers, but most of all, we need hope. This center used to be the heart of the community, but now it's just a reminder of what we've lost." William felt a pang of guilt. While he had been building a fortune, places like this, places that truly mattered, had been left behind. "I think we can turn this around," he said after a moment. "But it'll take a team effort." Over the next few weeks, William threw himself into the project with a passion he hadn't felt in years. He used his business connections to secure funding, reaching out to colleagues and corporations who were eager to support a good cause. With their donations, he arranged for contractors to begin repairing the roof and updating the electrical wiring. Meanwhile, Henry focused on rallying the neighborhood. He organized a group of volunteers to help with cleaning, painting, and small repairs. "You'd be surprised how many people want to help," Henry told William one evening. "They just need someone to believe in them." Together, the brothers transformed the center's main hall. William marveled at how seamlessly Henry worked with the community, joking with volunteers and making everyone feel valued. "You're a natural leader," William remarked one afternoon as they painted a mural on the wall. Henry shrugged, a hint of a smile on his face. "I've learned a lot about resilience over the years. This center has given me and Sophie so much. It's only right to give back." The work was hard but fulfilling. William found himself climbing ladders, hauling supplies, and even learning how to operate a power drill under Henry's watchful eye. He was surprised by how much he enjoyed the physical labor and the camaraderie it fostered. Sophie often joined them after school, her infectious energy brightening the atmosphere. She helped organize donated books for the new library and painted colorful designs on the walls. "Uncle William, look at this," she exclaimed one day, holding up a sign she had painted for the art room. It read, "Create your dreams." "It's perfect," William said, giving her a high five. "You're a natural artist." One Saturday, they held a community cleanup day, inviting residents to join in revitalizing the playground outside the center. Children laughed as they picked up litter, while parents planted flowers and repaired the swings. The once abandoned playground began to transform into a vibrant space filled with life. As the weeks went by, William and Henry's bond deepened. They often found themselves working late into the evening, sharing stories from their past as they cleaned paintbrushes or assembled furniture. "I was so angry at you for leaving," Henry admitted one night, his voice low. "When things got tough, I felt abandoned." "I didn't know how to handle it," William replied honestly. "I thought I was helping by sending money, but I realize now that's not what you needed. You needed me." Henry nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I needed my brother, but you're here now, and that means something." William felt a lump in his throat. "I'm not going anywhere this time." As the center neared completion, William began envisioning a larger purpose. "This doesn't have to be the only center we fix," he told Henry and Elena during a meeting. "What if we started a foundation? We could replicate this model in other neighborhoods." "That's ambitious," Elena said, though her eyes sparkled with excitement. "But if anyone can pull it off, it's you two." Henry grinned. "Count me in. I've seen what this place can do for people. Let's make it happen." The grand reopening of the community center was a moment of triumph. The once dilapidated building now stood vibrant and welcoming, with freshly painted walls, new furniture, and fully restored facilities. Families gathered in the main hall, their faces alight with hope and gratitude. William stood beside Henry and Sophie as Elena took the stage to thank everyone. "This center is more than just a building," she said. "It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together." As the crowd applauded, Sophie tugged at William's sleeve. "Uncle William, look, everyone's smiling." He smiled down at her, his heart full. "That's what happens when we work together, Sophie." As the celebration continued, William and Henry stood off to the side, watching the joy unfold. "We did good, didn't we?" Henry said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "We did," William agreed. "And this is just the beginning." In that moment, William felt a profound sense of purpose. The center wasn't just a project. It was a testament to the power of connection, family, and the belief that even the deepest wounds could be healed with love and effort. The sun rose bright and clear on the day of the community center's grand reopening. The freshly painted building gleamed in the morning light, its vibrant blue walls a stark contrast to the faded, chipped paint it had worn just months ago. The air was filled with the hum of excitement as neighbors gathered, chatting eagerly about the transformation of a space that had once been a symbol of decline. William Carter stood beside his brother Henry in front of the building's new entrance. Sophie darted around them, carrying a stack of flyers advertising the center's new programs. Her face was lit with joy, and her energy was infectious. "You nervous?" Henry asked, nudging William with his elbow. "Not nervous," William replied with a small smile. "Just grateful. This is more than I ever imagined." Henry nodded, a mix of pride and affection in his eyes. You should be. This place wouldn't exist without you. And it wouldn't exist without you, William countered. This was a team effort, Henry. As the crowd gathered, Elena, the center's director, stepped up to a makeshift stage set up in front of the building. A microphone crackled to life, and she smiled broadly at the audience. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice carrying over the chatter. Today isn't just about celebrating a building. It's about celebrating what we can achieve when we come together. This center has always been a cornerstone of our community, and now it's ready to shine again. Elena gestured toward William and Henry. We owe so much to these two incredible brothers. Their dedication, generosity, and hard work have brought this dream to life. Please join me in giving them a round of applause. The crowd erupted into cheers and claps. William felt his face flush with humility as Sophie grabbed his hand, tugging him forward. Go on, Uncle William. Say something. He exchanged a glance with Henry, who gave him an encouraging nod. Stepping up to the microphone, William took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. This community center represents something far greater than bricks and paint, he began. It represents the heart of this neighborhood, the resilience of its people, and the power of connection. For me, personally, this journey has been about rediscovering what truly matters: family, community, and giving back. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. I'd like to thank my brother Henry and my niece Sophie. Without them, I wouldn't be here today. They reminded me of what I'd lost and gave me a second chance to be part of their lives. The crowd applauded again, and William stepped back, allowing Henry to take the microphone. I just want to say how proud I am of all of us, Henry said, his voice steady and sincere. This wasn't just about fixing a building. It was about rebuilding trust, relationships, and hope. Thank you for welcoming us into your lives and letting us be part of this incredible community. As Henry finished speaking, the ribbon across the entrance was cut, and the doors were thrown open. Children rushed inside, eager to explore the freshly renovated space. Sophie ran ahead, tugging William's hand and pointing out the colorful new library and art room. As the day unfolded, William found himself filled with a profound sense of accomplishment. He walked through the building watching children paint on easels, seniors chatting over tea in the lounge, and volunteers guiding kids through tutoring sessions. Every corner of the center buzzed with life. Henry joined him near the playground, where Sophie and a group of friends were taking turns on the newly repaired swings. It's amazing, isn't it? Henry said, crossing his arms as he watched the scene. It really is, William agreed. But I think this is just the beginning. What do you mean? Henry asked. I've been thinking about how we can expand this, William said, his tone thoughtful. We could create a foundation, start similar projects in other neighborhoods. There are so many places that need this kind of support. Henry raised an eyebrow. That sounds ambitious. It is, William admitted. But with you by my side, I think we can make it happen. Henry's expression softened, a smile spreading across his face. You've got yourself a partner. That evening, as the celebration wound down, William invited Henry and Sophie back to his mansion for dinner. The once cold house now felt warm and alive as laughter echoed through its halls. Sophie climbed onto William's lap after dessert, holding up a drawing she had made at the center earlier that day. It showed 3 figures holding hands in front of a bright blue building. This is you, me, and Dad, she explained, pointing to each figure. We're a family. William felt his throat tighten as he hugged her. We are, Sophie, and we always will be. Henry raised his glass from across the table, his eyes glistening. To family. To family, William echoed, clinking glasses with him. As the night drew to a close, William walked Henry and Sophie to their car. Thank you, Henry said quietly, pulling William into a firm embrace. For everything. No, William replied, his voice steady. Thank you for giving me another chance. Sophie waved from the back seat as they drove away, and William stood in the driveway, watching until their taillights disappeared into the distance. The mansion was quiet again, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel lonely. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something new, a life filled with purpose, love, and the kind of wealth that couldn't be measured in dollars. William turned toward the house, a content smile on his face, ready to embrace whatever the future held. William had once believed his wealth defined him, but now he understood the true riches of life: family, connection, and making a difference in the lives of others. He had found not just redemption, but a purpose that filled the once empty spaces of his heart. This story is a reminder that it's never too late to reconnect, to heal, and to create something beautiful from the broken pieces of the past. If this tale touched your heart, make sure to hit the subscribe button and join us for more stories of hope, transformation, and the unbreakable bonds that bring us together. Don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your own stories of love and second chances. Together, let's keep spreading positivity.